Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever watched a Korean anime, a hangak any, and felt that thrill when an ordinary person's world suddenly explodes into color, power, and destiny? The story of David Brennon is exactly that kind of saga. So, imagine if you will, his life not as a boring biography, but as the greatest Korean anime never made. Imagine, if you will, the opening sequence of our anime. We don't start with a dramatic, rain-swept battle on the rooftops of a neon-drenched city. No, we begin in a world painted in the soft, muted watercolors of everyday life. The color palette is all gentle grays, warm beiges, and quiet blues. This is the world of David Brennon, our main character, and for the first 20 minutes of this premiere episode, we are lulled into a rhythm so familiar, so ordinary, that we almost forget we're watching an epic. David's life was a masterclass in the art of being background. He wasn't the brooding transfer student with a mysterious past, nor the loud-mouthed rookie with hidden potential. He was, by all accounts, an NPC in his own story. His apartment was a standard issue, one-room goshiwon, functional and devoid of personality, much like the countless identical apartments that form the skyline of any sprawling metropolis in a webtoon. His alarm clock buzzed at the same ungodly hour every morning, a sound as monotonous as the ticking of a clock. His daily commute on the subway was a study in collective anonymity, a sea of bowed heads in the soft glow of smartphone screens, where he was just another face in the crowd, his own reflection a ghost in the window against the passing darkness of the tunnel. He worked as a junior graphic designer at a small firm that specialized in creating packaging for other, slightly more exciting things. His job was to make the font on a bottle of herbal sleep aid look soothing, or to choose the perfect shade of yellow for a new brand of lemon cookies. It was a life of small, manageable tasks. He had a few friends, the kind you meet for cheap beer and fried chicken after a long week, where the conversations orbited around work complaints, mild gossip, and plans for the weekend that rarely materialized. He was polite, competent, and utterly, profoundly, fine. This is the crucial setup, the before picture that makes the after so breathtaking. In the language of Korean anime, this is the ordinary world, a stage meticulously designed to make the incoming chaos feel like a violation of a sacred peace. Think of Cha Hae-in from Solo Leveling working her office job before the system changed everything, or the mundane school life of the characters in All of Us Are Dead before the hallways ran red. The creators spend this precious time making you feel the texture of this normalcy, the taste of instant ramen eaten alone, the sound of rain against the windowpane, the comfortable weight of a predictable routine. David's reluctance wasn't born of cowardice, but of a deep, ingrained contentment with this small world. He wasn't dreaming of a grander destiny. His dreams were simple: a slightly bigger apartment, maybe a cat, a project at work he could truly be proud of. He had built walls around his heart, not out of fear, but out of a desire for a quiet life. The call to adventure, when it came, was therefore not a welcome trumpet blast, but a dissonant, terrifying noise. And how does the call come? It's never a formal invitation. It's not a golden ticket or an owl-delivered letter. In the best stories, the call is an ambush. For David, it began with a glitch. A small, almost imperceptible crack in his reality. It was a forgotten lullaby he'd hear in the hum of the subway, a melody that tugged at a memory so deep and buried it felt like it belonged to someone else. Then came the dreams, not epic nightmares of monsters, but fragmented, emotional echoes. The feeling of a warm hand in his, the scent of rain on dry earth, a flash of a symbol he didn't recognize, a circle bisected by a single, unwavering line. He'd wake with a start, his heart pounding, the emotion vivid but the meaning utterly lost, like a message in a bottle with the writing washed away. The call escalated. A strange, silver pocket watch appeared one day on his desk at work, left by no one. It was cold to the touch, and its hands didn't tell the time of day, but seemed to point towards something. He'd see a tall, elegant man in a dark, anachronistic coat watching him from across the street, a man who would be gone when David blinked. These weren't threats, they were whispers. The universe was tapping him on the shoulder, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to shrug it off, to go back to his designs for lemon cookies, to pretend he hadn't seen the cracks forming in the foundation of his world. This is the heart of the reluctant hero, the refusal of the call. He actively resists. He throws the pocket watch in a drawer and buries it under old socks. He takes a different route to work to avoid the place where he saw the tall man. He throws himself into his mundane tasks with a frantic energy, as if he could outrun the weirdness chasing him. It's just stress, he'd tell himself, "I just need more sleep." He was trying to patch the cracks with normalcy, a futile effort that only made the coming collapse more inevitable. The final, undeniable call, the one he could no longer ignore, was, as it often is, a tragedy. It wasn't a grand, world-ending event, not yet. It was personal, intimate, and devastating. Returning home one evening, he found his small apartment different. Not ransacked, but altered. A single, perfect black feather lay on his pillow. And on his wall, drawn in what looked like shimmering dust, was that same symbol from his dreams, the bisected circle. As he stared, his heart hammering against his ribs, the symbol began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. And in that light, a vision flooded his mind, not as a dream, but as a visceral, overwhelming memory. A woman's face, her smile kind but her eyes full of a profound sadness, speaking a single word that was both a name and a key, his true name, the one he had forgotten. In that moment, the watercolor world of his ordinary life shattered. The muted grays were burned away by the searing, brilliant gold of the symbol. The comfortable silence was broken by the deafening roar of a past he never knew he had. The call was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. The first episode of his life was over. The opening credits, with their driving, epic theme song and stunningly animated action sequences, were only now beginning to roll. David Brennon, the background character, stood at the threshold, terrified and utterly unprepared, forced to pick up a sword he never wanted to wield, and step into a story that was his all along. Every hero's journey, once the call is finally answered, follows a universal law: no one climbs the mountain alone. For David Brennon, stumbling out of the wreckage of his old life, terrified and clutching the metaphysical sword he never wanted, the path forward was illuminated by two fundamental forces, a guiding light and a supporting constellation. This is the chapter where the solo act becomes an ensemble, where the monochrome struggle bursts into the vibrant colors of camaraderie. First, enters the mentor. But this isn't a wizened old man in a remote mountain dojo waiting for destiny to knock. In the style of the best Korean anime, the mentor finds the hero in the gutter, at their absolute lowest. For David, it was in a rain-slicked alley. Shivering and lost, the cryptic vision of the woman's face his only compass. From the shadows, a figure emerged, an old man named Jin-ho, who ran a small, cluttered antique shop that seemed to exist just slightly out of phase with the rest of the city. He wasn't introduced with a dramatic thunderclap, but with the soft chime of a shop doorbell. Jin-ho had eyes that held a profound, weary knowledge, like the librarian of a forbidden archive. He didn't offer power, he offered a cup of warm, barley tea and a simple, devastating statement: "I knew your mother." In that moment, he became more than a teacher, he became David's tether to the truth, the living bridge to the past he was forced to reclaim. His training wasn't just about learning to throw a punch or channel energy. It was a re-education of the soul. Jin-ho taught David that the whispers of his inner demon were not a foreign invader, but a part of his own spirit, a scared, powerful child that needed to be understood, not silenced. He was the calm, unwavering voice countering the shadow's corrosive lies, much like a master guiding a disciple through the tumultuous awakening of a latent power. He was the anchor in the storm. But a single anchor is not enough to hold a ship against a hurricane. This is where the found family assembles, one glorious, chaotic member at a time. This wasn't a formal recruitment, it was a gravitational pull. There was Tae Shik, the hot-headed martial artist with a core of unshakable loyalty, who became David's sparring partner and fierce protector. Their relationship was a clatter of fists and friendly insults, a bond forged in shared bruises and post-training meals of sizzling pork belly. Then came Su-min, the serene yet fiercely intelligent strategist whose healing abilities mended their wounds while her sharp wit kept their egos in check. She was the group's heart and its tactical mind, able to see 3 moves ahead in a fight where the others saw only chaos. And finally, there was Ga, the tech-savvy information broker who could hack into any system and whose network of contacts was as vast as her collection of limited-edition sneakers. She was their eyes and ears in the modern world, the one who could find a hidden base with a few keystrokes. Together, they were no longer just individuals. They were a unit. They were the comedic relief during late-night study sessions of ancient lore, the unwavering support when a mission failed, and the collective roar of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. They were the reason David learned to laugh again, to trust again, to fight for something, rather than just against something. They transformed his lonely quest for answers into a shared purpose, proving that the greatest power a hero can ever wield is not found within themselves, but in the bonds they form with those who choose to stand beside them. The training montages were over. The bonds with his new family were forged. David Brennon could now channel the energy that surged within him, a power as brilliant and terrifying as a lightning strike. He could shatter stone and move faster than the human eye could follow. But this was not a clean, heroic power. This was the chapter where the series took a sharp, psychological turn, diving deep into the central, terrifying truth: the most dangerous enemy was not waiting in a fortress, but was a resident in his own soul. The power itself was breathtaking to behold. When David summoned it, the air would hum, charged with the scent of ozone and static. It manifested as a corona of crimson energy, swirling around him like liquid flame. It was raw, untamed potential, the kind of power that could level a city block or vaporize a demon. His companions would watch in a mixture of awe and trepidation, for its beauty was matched only by its destructiveness. In the heat of battle, it was a loyal, ferocious beast, answering his rage with overwhelming force. But power like this always has a shadow. For every surge of crimson energy, a deeper, darker purple aura would flicker at its core, the visual manifestation of his inner demon. This entity wasn't a separate creature, it was the twisted, amplified version of his own pain, his insecurities, and the deep-seated fear that had festered since his ordinary life was torn away. It didn't roar, it whispered. And its voice was the most seductive and terrifying sound David had ever known. In the quiet moments after a fight, or in the solitude of his room, the voice would coil in his mind. "They are holding you back," it would hiss when Tae Shik made a tactical error. "She pities you, she doesn't trust you," it would murmur when Su Min offered a concerned glance. The demon preyed on his every weakness, offering a simple, brutal solution: to sever the bonds he held so dear, to embrace the isolation that would make him truly, invincibly strong. It was the temptation of the easy path, the promise of becoming a god untroubled by human sentiment. This created a brutal duality in every conflict. A battle against a horde of spectral monsters was simultaneously a battle for the integrity of his own mind. We, the audience, would see this play out visually. The screen would split, or the animation style would shift. On one side, the dynamic, high-octane fight choreography. On the other, a stark, psychological landscape where a shadowy doppelganger of David would confront him, its words laced with poisonous truth. To use his power was to feed this inner demon. To hold back was to risk the lives of his friends. He was trapped in a terrible balancing act, a wire stretched over an abyss. This is the core of the Korean anime ethos, the exploration of how power corrupts, not in a grand, theatrical way, but through a slow, insidious erosion of the self. David's journey was no longer about getting stronger, it was about learning control. It was about finding the strength to acknowledge the darkness within without letting it consume him. The crimson energy was his to command, but the true test was whether he could command the rage and fear that fueled it. Every victory against an external foe was tempered by a small, internal victory, or a devastating loss. The question was no longer if he could win the war outside, but whether he could survive the one raging within. The final season arrives. The stakes are cosmic. The malevolent entity known as the Eclipse Bringer has woven its tendrils through the fabric of reality, its goal to shroud the world in an eternal, silent night. Cities are encased in crystalline prisons, and hope is a dying ember. Our heroes, battered but unbroken, make their desperate push to the heart of the storm, a shattered floating fortress where the laws of physics have been undone. This is the final battlefield the entire series has been hurtling towards. The music swells, the animation budget is on full, breathtaking display, and David Brennon faces the source of all this chaos. But as the battle is joined, a terrifying realization dawns. The Eclipse Bringer is not a monster to be fought, but a void to be understood. Its attacks are not beams of pure energy, but manifestations of forgotten sorrow, projected fear, and reflected trauma. When it strikes, David doesn't see a beast, he sees the lonely child he once was, watching his mother fade away. He sees the anxiety of his old, mundane life, the fear of being insignificant. The villain begins to speak, not in a roar of defiance, but with his own voice, echoing every doubt and insecurity the inner demon had ever whispered. This is the ultimate twist, the brilliant narrative feint. The final boss was never an external force. It was a mirror, a perfect, terrifying reflection of David's own untamed power and unhealed pain, given form and sentience. The Eclipse Bringer was what he could become, and in some dark corner of his soul, what he feared he already was, a being of pure, destructive energy, divorced from the human connections that gave it meaning. The physical combat becomes almost secondary, a spectacular but ultimately meaningless dance of clashing light. The true battle shifts to a stark, internal plane, a landscape of memory and emotion. Here, David must finally, truly, confront his shadow self. There are no fancy techniques here, no super-powered finishers. It is a raw, psychological war. He is forced to relive his greatest failures, to acknowledge the times he reveled in the destructive thrill of his crimson power, to accept the part of him that believed the demon's lies about the weakness of connection. To win, he cannot destroy this reflection. He must do the one thing harder than any act of violence: he must embrace it. He must look at the culmination of his own darkness, the embodiment of the eclipse bringer within his own heart, and speak the words he has spent a lifetime running from: "You are a part of me. My pain, my rage, my fear, but you are not all of me." This acceptance is not a defeat, it is an integration. It is the final, missing piece of the puzzle. In a cataclysm of light, not of destruction, but of absolution, the crimson and purple energies don't explode outward, they fuse, swirling into a brilliant, serene silver. He doesn't obliterate the eclipse bringer, he absorbs it, tames it, and makes it whole. The external threat dissipates not because it was vanquished, but because its reason for existing, his internal conflict, has finally been resolved. The victory is not over an enemy, but a homecoming to himself. David Brennon stands, not as a conqueror, but as a man finally, completely, at peace with every fractured part of his own soul.